Please be seated. It is my pleasure to welcome you to St. Andrew by the Sea United Methodist Church and also to the Dr. Julius Scott Jr. Lecture Series. I'm Frank Lybrand. I'm one of the pastors here at St. Andrew by the Sea. And in behalf of this congregation, the Bridge Builders, we welcome you this morning. We've got a wonderful crowd, and we're glad that you've taken the time to be with us this morning. Just a few housekeeping concerns. If you're in need of the restroom facilities, if you'll go out the door and take a left down that hallway, they are on the right. And also following the program this morning is a reception in the Celebration Center. As you go out the front door, you will see the Celebration Center to the right. Just follow the ramp and it will lead you straight to the Celebration Center. David Laverdale, a well-known journalist in these parts, said of Dr. Julius Scott, he was a peacemaker. You know, peacemakers sometimes disturb, and in their disturbing, they're making peace. Dr. Scott was a peacemaker. He held degrees from Wiley College, Garrett Evangelical Theological Seminary, Brown University, and Boston University. While he was at Boston University, he met Dr. Martin Luther King, and they became friends. His interest in nonviolent protest grew there, and Dr. Scott spent some time in India studying the teachings of Mahatma Gandhi, as well as teaching and serving as a missionary for a short period. He served as professor, president, interim president, and chaplain of 11 colleges and universities. He served as the Associate General Secretary of the Division of Higher Education of the United Methodist Church and led the Global Higher Education Committee. St. Andrew by the Sea United Methodist Church declared him Pastor Emeritus a few years ago, and he also received the Penn Center's most prestigious award when he was inducted into the 1862 circle. In 2016, the Bridge Builders Group was formed, and Dr. Scott had a part in its beginnings. Dr. Scott once said, "It's not enough to raise the tent once a year." He believed Dr. King's dream of a beloved community, and he believed that the community needed to talk not just once a year, but year-round. Building a beloved community, Dr. Scott said, first begins with communication. That's the purpose of Bridge Builders. And that's the purpose of these Julius Scott lecture series. Welcome.
Good morning again. On behalf of the Scott family, we just welcome you again. It's just so great to see everybody here. And today is really ironic because just the other day we were talking about how my father's thoughts and his ideals and ideas are still relevant today, even from things that he shared from years and years ago. And so we found this prayer that my father wrote back in December of 1970. And we thought it was only fitting that we share with you this morning. We thought it was marvelous. Let us pray. O God, our Father, in the midst of ambiguity and contradiction, we praise thy name and bring our thanks for all the things which by thy grace are present in the world. We glory in thy greatness and power and depth beyond all comprehension. Thou who hast opened the minds of men and women to discern the things that are, we thank you. We thank you for the richness and the beauty of life, for music and poetry, for artists and the artisans, for the symbols placed in our midst which unlock the vast spaces of emotions that lead us into the richness of nobler passions. Be present with us now as we recall the endless benedictions by which our lives have been enriched. Continue to assure us of your power and glory. Grant unto us some unexpected gift of thy grace, some needed insight and guidance, some vision of new possibilities, some fresh source of strength and courage. Be for us an internal fortress amid the anxiety and confusion of our time, so that our hearts may rejoice and take refuge in thee. Help us in our time to behold your divine majesty and make us reverent in this hour, that we may understand our call to be mediators of joy, of peace, and love. Amen.
Good morning. In 2005, a few people, just about what I'd call a remnant, less than 10, but a very interesting group. There were quite a few Native Islanders, northern born, but Southern retired to enjoy the wonderful weather, as well as back to 2005. In 2005, there were a few of us that came together, and we decided that there needed to be something done with this idea of Mitchellville. It was started really as the experiment of Port Royal. In the day, excuse me, I'm kind of dry mouth. As I said, there were Native Islanders, Northerners, and even Europeans that came together in 2005 because they heard, some man called us and told us that there was a wonderful meeting that we needed to come to. And when we got there, he said, "Are you familiar with Mitchellville?" Most of us said no. However, he told us the people in Charleston are very excited and planning for the Civil War anniversary, a sesquicentennial for 150 years of the war. What are you all doing? Because they're planning one side of the story, and I think Mitchellville ought to tell the other side of the story. Most in attendance knew nothing about Mitchellville. However, there was a woman in the group who was a staff person at the Heritage Library. Louise Lawrence knew quite a bit about Mitchellville. Most of us didn't, but she was a wonderful help, and the group decided that, yes, we wanted to tell the rest of the story. We formed this organization, and we named it MPP, the Mitchellville Preservation Project. And now, Sharon will share with you some more of the story.
As a young man, Ahmad had two interests, art and history. These interests merged when he was encouraged to apply to Hampton University, majoring in museum studies. His Hampton education led him to Birmingham, Alabama, and the Institute of Civil Rights, where he taught for 18 years. Looking for a shift in careers, he was sought after to interview for a leadership position for the new Mitchellville project in Hilton Head. Prior to his interview, he visited New Orleans, specifically the Whitney Plantation, a museum which presented the lives of enslaved people in stark and horrific reality. Ahmad realized the sharp comparison of these two places, and now Mitchellville honored the integrity and pride of these newly freed people.
Back in the day, Paul Harvey of the radio personality fame in Chicago often started out his show as, "And now the rest of the story." So please let us welcome the executive director of the historic Mitchellville Freedom Park, Mr. Ahmad Ward.
Good morning. I didn't know I was special enough to get two people to introduce me this morning. This is very, thank you for that. I need you to get y'all to do this with me more often. I have to do one small caveat. I cut my teeth more on art earlier and growing up in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. And when my advisor, Alexis, joined us, said, "Hey, I know you're trying to figure out what you're going to do next," because ladies and gentlemen, I did not want to be an art teacher in the state of North Carolina at that time. They were glorified babysitters, people who drop their kids off and leave. So I was avoiding that at all costs. But Mr. Joyner, who I'm still really tight with, said, "Hey, Ma, think about this museum studies program at Hampton when you graduate." I was at Elizabeth City State University, getting my art degree. A minor in business administration so I could make sure my mom knew I was going to be able to eat, because, you know, the whole thing about art is not making money. And I said, Alexis, I appreciate you, sir. I don't know any black people doing museum studies programs. So, like, what is this? What are you trying to get me to go do? He said, just check it out. And I fell in love with the collection at Hampton. And ended up doing this, saying, okay, well, this is what I'll do for work, and I'll do the art thing on the side. And so my first gig was in Birmingham, Alabama. And guess what I did for the first year and a half there? I was in every classroom in the greater Birmingham metro area talking about the civil rights movement. So I still am an educator. Didn't come out there traditionally, but I call myself a somewhat educator and a pseudo-historian. And so because I'm a pseudo-historian, I'm very honored to be here to talk to you at the Reverend Dr. Julius Scott Jr. Lecture Series. And thank you to the Scott family. I appreciate you doing this, and so proud to be up here. So what we're going to do over the next few minutes or so is talk about why Mitchellville is a thing, and how I am fortunate to be the bearer of the news with you today. And just on cue, like we planned it, there is a slide presentation. I got to tell you, as I was in Birmingham, going to all these spaces, and so I was in Birmingham for 18 years. And for 15 of those years, I ran the education department. And so a good educator makes linkages, right? It can't just be, I'm going to tell you the stuff, and then I'll walk away. I got to show you how we got there. And so it's cause and effect. Everything is a cause and effect. So I had to go back. If I'm talking about the civil rights movement of the 20th century, I got to talk about Jim Crow. I have to talk about the black codes, which preceded Jim Crow. We have to talk about Reconstruction and the Civil War. And so in making all of these linkages, I never saw anything about Mitchellville. And so when this position came across my eyes to take a look at, I started reading about this and learning more about Mitchellville. I got a little perturbed, ladies and gentlemen. I got to be honest with you. Like, why didn't I know about any of this stuff? This is important history. And I grew up just about 6-7 hours north of here on the coast of North Carolina. And where I'm from, they just pour Civil War stuff into your brains, okay? We get it all the time. But nobody ever talked about this. And I wish I can give you a good answer why I don't know. I do not know. Next slide, please. But this is what Mitchellville looked like in the 1860s, 70s, and 80s. Those little blocks that you see there, those are homes. This was all designed by the Army Corps of Engineers on a grid system. And so at its height, between 1862 and 1868, there were 3,000 people in this community, about 500 homes. That seems pretty substantial for us to not know anything about it, right? Well, I'm about to tell you some more things that'll make you blow your mind. Like, why do we know this stuff? Next slide, please. So I'm not expecting you to read all of this because it translates a little differently with that size. But the gist. Back in November 7th, 1861, there's the Battle of Port Royal, which happens right off of the coastline of Hilton Head in the body of water called the Port Royal Sound between Fort Walker on this side and Fort Beauregard on the St. Helena side. If anybody's been to the park, I'm assuming most of you have. I've seen some faces before there. You go to the observation deck and look across the water, you can see St. Helena. It's just that close. Now, it's going to take us an hour to drive there from here, but a good boat to get you there in about 30 minutes from where we are. So they had this ingenious plan to sail in a circle between these two bodies of land and reload in open water. When they got to the forts, they were firing. So you have 3 hours of constant barrage between these two forts. So the Confederates, after 3 hours, decide they can't stay, they leave. The overseers on the 24 plantations on Hilton Head decide they can't stay, they leave. Who's left? The enslaved population is just standing there like, what do we do now? And so they did the common sense thing. They tried to make their way to where the army was. Said, hey, we have skills, we know how to do things, we're willing to work for anything we can get, we want to preserve our families. But at this point, they're considered contraband of war. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Every time I've ever heard the word contraband, it's been negative, right? If you get caught with contraband, you're probably getting in trouble. So the folks didn't really relish this idea of being called contraband. But it comes out of the Conscription Act of 1861. This all goes back to Virginia as a theme here. This goes back to Fort Monroe at Hampton, Virginia, where 3 freedom seekers find their way to Fort Monroe, escaping Confederate control. Now, this is during the war, y'all. The Confederates actually approached the fort and asked for their property back. We're shooting at each other. But it's like, hey, time out. Can we get those 3 people over there real quick? And then we can start firing again. Is it all right with you? Of course, General Benjamin Butler said, no, they're considered contraband of war, and this sticks. And so at this time, these are contraband. Next slide, please. These are contraband in this space. So David Hunter, who is not pictured here, is the commander of the South at the time. He has this bright idea. He's going to free every colored man that's around him right now who fights for the Union Army unilaterally, across the board. He uses this language from the General Order number 15 from General Sherman, where you find the language for 40 acres and a mule. That's another whole conversation we will go into. But he decides that he can have this power because, let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, within the first day or so after the battle, there were 80 people that showed up where the Army encampment was. Within a week and a half, it's up to 400. There's no phone tree. There are no emails going out. This is all word of mouth that if you make it to Hilton Head, you can be free. I see my friend Louise Cohen in here, who has a story about her ancestors leaving Rose Hill Plantation and making their way to Mitchellville under cover of night. Because they knew they'd get there. There are 30,000 to 40,000 Union troops on this 12-mile island. It's a pretty safe bet that you're going to be all right. Nobody's going to follow you on the island, right? At the Palmetto Bluff Conservancy, they have records from the plantation there, and you can look in the records and see the enslaved people that escaped to the enemy, in quotes. They made it to Hilton Head. So this guy comes in because Hunter did not have the power to do that. He got in trouble. You know, he got away with it for about 2 or 3 months, and then the right people in Washington find out about it. Lincoln did not want to ruin this man's career, so he reassigns him. In comes this stoic gentleman right here, Ormsby Mitchell, who sees the lay of the land. He is, of course, a military man. He's an astronomer. We got any Ohio people in here? Of course, we always have Ohio people on the island. I can't go anywhere without seeing Ohio people around here. Raised in Ohio, helps to start the first observatory in the state of Ohio. If you go to the Cincinnati Observatory now, they have a telescope that he brought there. But he's also an abolitionist because his father owned people and told Ormsby that was the worst thing he'd ever done in his life and encouraged him to never be involved in that practice. So he gets to Hilton Head, sees the lay of the land, sees the overcrowding, because now you got like a barracks system, almost like a shanty town, and it's not well regulated, so things are happening. And he makes his decision. He gives them 200 to 300 acres of property of the old Drayton Plantation, also known as Fish Hall Creek. Says, this is your land, you build on it, you grow on it. It's a chance to maintain your own soil, protect your families, have something that belongs to you. Next slide, please. They were given a 1/4 acre of a lot, each family. So some of you didn't grow up farm adjacent like I did. Not on a farm, but farm adjacent. I knew where farms were, I could see them. So if you know anything about farms, an acre, you know, you could tell what an acre is. Most of us cannot. So a 1/4 acre is almost like 1/4 of a football field. So for my football fans, think of that as like a 25-yard pass, all right? That's how much property that they had, which is a lot, okay? And said, you could do anything you want to do with this property. For the first time ever, these people actually have agency over their own lives. First time ever. So if you don't remember anything else that I say to you this morning in our time together, and people who have heard me talk before, I say this every time because it's important. These folks went from being property to owning property. You cannot undersell that, okay? It is it is a sea change. It means everything to the community here. You got something that's yours for the first time. And so they go to start building all the things in the land here. They got organized trash pickup in 1860s, y'all. Organized trash pickup. Mayor council form of government. You know, they started businesses and churches and schools. This is the site of the first mandatory school system in the state of South Carolina. And potentially the Southeast. I need more research first before I can make that claim. But they knew that true freedom is up here because nobody can enslave this. And so between the age of 6 to 15, you had to go to school if you lived in Mitchellville. That school district was created in 1866. Now, after that, everybody who was freed by the Emancipation Proclamation were no longer considered contraband, but this community was up and running 2 months before the Emancipation Proclamation in the state that started the Civil War. During the Civil War, at the height of enslavement, you've got this freed community on this island that is rubber stamped by the Union Army. And yet, you have never seen this in a history book. I wish I could tell you why. I have some theories, but we don't have enough time for that. Next slide, please. So this place will remain a community deep until close to the 20th century. It's 1893, you have the Great Sea Islands hurricane that happens. 2,500 people are killed during this hurricane along the Sea Islands. It is America's greatest natural disaster until Galveston in the 19-teens. And so for those of you who are familiar with Hilton Head, everything from Folly Field Road to Coligny was submerged. So everything at Mitchellville, which is built up on piers, gets destroyed. And so the government is not moving quickly at all to repair this area. Okay, now I will take a dive at this. You can imagine the people who were in this area at the time and what they looked like. They looked like me. So the government is like, we'll get there whenever we get there. But there's a person named Clara Barton, you might have heard of her before, started the American Red Cross, who was a nurse on Hilton Head during the war, was familiar with Mitchellville. People reached out to her and said, we need help. And so Barton is incensed by the government's inaction, and she is the reason that Hilton Head and Beaufort County get back up to speed. She is the engine that starts this giving process nationally to get supplies up through Beaufort to spread out to the rest of the county. So without her, it would have taken years to get back into speed. She's a very important person to the story, but not the only important person to the story. William Lloyd Garrison, the foremost abolitionist of the time besides Frederick Douglass, requests to come to Mitchellville so he can see this freedman town he had been hearing about. And he gives a speech at Mitchellville the day before Lincoln is assassinated. I found out 3 years ago that he actually invited the president to come with him on that trip. He probably should have went on the trip. Maybe he doesn't go to the theater then, right? But he gives this speech at First African Baptist Church, which was the first building built in Mitchellville in August of 1862, which is still standing. All three of those churches on Beach City Road are all Mitchellville-era churches, just in different locations. Okay, there were 4 churches altogether, one named after the Secretary of War, Simon Cameron, who also visited this space and gave money for a chapel. That is the only one that's not operational. I don't know why, possibly after the hurricane, they were not unable to get that congregation back together. And before we move on, one other very famous person, you ever heard of this lady named Harriet Tubman before, y'all? So at the Battle of the Combahee River, where they freed 756 people, she co-led this raid and personally brought 100 of those people back to Hilton Head, and guess where they settled? Mitchellville, exactly. So you got American luminaries that are tied to this community, and yet you still don't see it in the history book. You see the theme, okay? But fortunately, you had people in the 80s who decided, hey, there's something going on around here, and before Doc knew what was going on with this place, Michael Trinkley did archaeological work in this area in the 1980s and got this property on the National Register for Historic Places. So that property is protected by the National Register. Nothing can happen to it. We are very fortunate that we have a lease with the town. The town owns the property, so those now only 36 acres that remain are protected that we have to build on. Next slide. So I promise you, when it's the format, like that background image is faded on a regular presentation, so you're like, why has he got this black writing over this big thing? I'm sorry, it didn't translate well. But you can see it if you look at it on different platforms. But I'm going to read this to you. This is our mission: to preserve, promote, and honor historic Mitchellville, the first town of self-governing, formerly enslaved people in the United States. Next slide, please. So what we're about to do, oh, that really doesn't show up well like this. So you got to squint and see, that says preserve. Okay, when I do it on projectors, it looks like preserve. So we're going to go through those 3 action words real quickly, okay? Preserve, promote, and honor, because that's how we are looking at this project and our method to go forward. So preserve, next slide. So we have done archaeology on the site since 2017. And this young lady with the yellow cap here is Catherine Sieber. And she has helped us find a few things. If you see that first picture up there with a blue tent, right where that first guy is standing or kneeling in the sand in his sock feet, we found a shaded right angle in the sand. If you dig down 3 feet, you have sand. And that is where the 1860s era is, meaning over 162 years, 3 feet of stuff has accumulated. Okay? When you get down there, they found a shaded right angle in the sand. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there are no right angles in nature. And if you didn't know that, that's okay. I'm just going to nod and say, oh, yeah, of course there. Of course, Ahmad. We knew that. No right angles in nature. So there was a building there. So the next year, we went to the other side of that little building there, that praise house, on the other end in 2019, and found the other half of that shaded area. The Army maps tell us there was a building somewhere in that vicinity that was 30 by 52 feet. So the archaeologists used sonar and magnetometry, in other words that I can't pronounce really well, to look under the ground and see where things are. And using their technical term, blobs, they found a blob underneath the ground that was like 28 by 50. And they think that's a church. Now, that building there is a replica of a praise house. There were no praise houses in Mitchellville, but there were praise houses all through South Carolina and Georgia. This was built in 2014 for the first Juneteenth festival that this organization put on. They had no clue they were putting this right where this church was. They didn't know. So this is sitting right on top of the imprint of one of the churches in Mitchellville. So obviously, my first thought, hey, we're going to build the church. Put a church out there. It'll be the education building, 'cause that's where everything started. That'll be the town hall. It'll be the courthouse. You know, that's what it was back in the day. We'd do education programs there. No problem. Until the last week of the excavation. Because one of Katie's people made a joke to me and said, oh, Ahmad, you know, we always find something weird on the last week. Ha, ha, ha. So I'm in my office, which is 7 minutes away in the old Beaufort County Government South building. And I get a phone call from Katie, and she sounds really panicked. And she says, Ahmad, I need you to come to the park as soon as humanly possible. I'm like, okay, I get that. She says, Ahmad, I need you to come to the park as soon as you can. So, okay, I get in my car, And I'll fully admit to you, ladies and gentlemen, I got a lot of panic going on in my system now because I'm sitting there behind the wheel saying, Lord, please let there be no skeletons out there. Please don't let there be any bones in this hole that she's, Lord Jesus. And so I walk up, heart's in my throat, and she is like sheet white. And she's pointing to this hole, and she's like, we found something, I can't explain it. Ladies and gentlemen, when the experts tell you they don't know what's happening, you panic. And so you look in the hole, there's another shaded area, but it's a semicircle. But this semicircle is the size of a banquet table. It is this big. She's like, it's not a shell ring. They could have used it for a food pit. But we think they were using this in some way to communicate with their ancestors. So that means that this was there 4,000 years ago. And then 162 years ago, they built a church in that same area. And then a few years ago, they put this praise house in that same area. I don't believe in coincidences. So we had to change that design. And the front of that will be this galvanized structure. I'll tell you a little later. I'll show it to you, actually. And we're going to talk about both of these important parts of history in that area at once because we have to. We have to. Next slide. So this little thing here, right before the excavation was over in 2020, said, hey, Amar, we found some bricks over here. They look like Mitchellville era bricks. Okay, cool. It was above ground. It's about 4 feet. When we get ready to stop, we'll remove them. So when it's time to remove them, I get another phone call. Not quite as panicked, but like, hey, if you're coming out here, I need to show you something. So it wasn't just a couple of stray bricks. It was the top of a brick hearth that is still there, buried under 4 feet of dirt. And it goes down 4 feet. Those oyster shells that you see are from 160 years ago. And so we don't even think they were using it to cook food. We think they were using it to cook tabby. And if you don't know what tabby is, you burn oysters to get, I know you know what it is. You burn oyster shells to get lye. You mix in sand, water, and oysters. You see it all the time around here where oysters are embedded into structures. That's tabby. We think they were using it to cook tabby. We thought that Michael Trinkley had taken it out when he did the dig in the 80s. He didn't. They just buried it to keep it safe. So Katie says, what do you want us to do with it? I'm like, bury it to keep it safe. And so we have this big cap over it right now. This is the only structure that we know is still standing out there in Mitchellville. So in that area, I had this nice water retention pond. It was really beautiful, y'all. Had a bridge going over it. It was going to be a nice area. It's gone. Because we have this, and we have to interpret it in some way possible. We got to figure out how to do it safely so it doesn't disturb the bricks and people can still see it. So we're still trying to figure that out. Next slide, please. We are very fortunate that we are on the Reconstruction Era National Historic Network now. This network is probably up to 75 sites now, but any place that is tied into the story of Reconstruction is part of this network. We are there because Mitchellville is basically the rehearsal for Reconstruction. This is how all black free towns should have looked like going into the 20th century until Reconstruction was sabotaged. Again, that's another long story we don't have time to get into right now, but Reconstruction was sabotaged. Go back and look at 1877, the Rutherford Hayes presidency. You'll get some more information. Next slide, please. So you can't see it, but promote. Next slide. So we're promoting these things through events. In that top corner, we got our Freedom Day. Some of y'all were there. I saw some of you on Freedom Day, the first weekend of February, and we do this to honor Freedom Day. There was a guy named Major Richard Robert Wright who was born into slavery around 1855, and when he came out as a young person, just had this thing in his mind about chronicling this history. Now, he worked most of his adult life trying to start a Freedom Day that would celebrate the end of the war and freedom for everybody. Now, this guy did a lot of things. He started a bank. He opened a high school. He started this school called the Georgia Institute for Colored People, which is now Savannah State University. He was a big deal. And so because of his works, in 1947, he passes, but in 1948, almost a year to the day, the House and the Senate approved this measure to make Freedom Day a thing. So February 1st, every year, is Freedom Day in the United States. We do our program in conjunction with NIPCA, who does the Gullah celebration, who just ended. Congratulations. I know y'all are tired. I am too, and I wasn't even at all the events. But that is something we do every year. Griot's Corner is a program we have geared towards K through third graders. It is a literacy program. We do it in the heart and spirit of Mitchellville training. The griot is a West African historian and storyteller. The person holds the story of their people. It's usually passed down to the eldest son. I'm gonna back up a little bit from this microphone. And we do this instruction by large trees, right? Just like the West African griots used to do. So it's a literacy program for this grade level. We do books, we do activities around the program. We give the books to the teachers so they can build a library with more diverse subject matter for themselves, okay? And we do this at the big tree in the park that you've seen. It is a 300-year-old oak tree, creatively entitled the Big Oak Tree. We did a lot of focus group stuff on that, trying to get with the right, what was gonna be the right, next slide, please. Blues and Barbecue is it's our main fundraiser. It's coming up very soon, April the 6th, 12 to 3. You can get tickets online right now at exploremitchellville.org. That's my commercial for today. You'll probably hear it again. We have a chance to celebrate and do an edutainment event. I like edutainment events. We want to have fun, and you'll learn something at the same time. And who doesn't like blues and barbecue? Two great things. So we hope to see y'all at the park on April the 6th. All right, next slide. We are moving into the 10th anniversary of our Juneteenth celebration. We've been doing this for 10 years. And so we have a whole week of stuff coming up this summer. We'll start with a 5K on June the 8th. So if you are runners, I am not. That is not my ministry. But if you'd like to run, we have a 5K on the 8th. We've got events through the course of the week. We're doing a program with the Audubon Society that week. There's a sleepover in the park for you who like to do camping. I do not. But I might sleep out there with y'all this year. Joe McGill runs the Slave Dwelling Project, and Brother Joe goes to places all over the country where enslaved people have rested or lived. He is a very powerful soul, and he is probably more of a man than I am, because I've seen some of the places that he slept overnight, and I'm not doing it. Okay? I did one thing with him in Orange, Virginia, at the site of James Madison home, Mount Pelier. It was very spooky, y'all. We had to go back to the he was going to stay out there where the dwellings were. We went back to the house, all right? But he'll be there on Thursday night. Now, for those of you who are interested in this, we have tents, and our tents have bottoms, and they zip all the way around for those of you who don't like bugs. And we have those for you on sale as well. So just let us know if you're going to come out and hang with us on that Thursday, drum circle that Friday. The event is that Saturday the 15th from 10:30 to 3. Last year we had 1,400 people out there at the park for Juneteenth, and I suspect it would be somewhat more of the same. So we look forward to seeing you. Tickets will be on sale soon. This whole thing will not be a commercial. Okay, I'm sorry. Next slide. Then we have this program, which we started during COVID, Holiday Nights and Lights. We had been doing a program by the Big Oak Tree for a few years just to kick off the holidays. It's always that first Monday of December, you know, just a way for us to get together. In 2020, we couldn't get together. And we had something that happened that never happens for nonprofits. We had money left over at the end of the year, and we had to spend it because it was grant funds. So we came up with this idea, let's just put lights around the park, let people ride through. We'll do it for this year and see what happens, you know. 2 hours a night, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. And then, okay, we'll see, some people will show up. We had 2,500 people show up in 6 hours. The sheriff department hated us. They hated us. It took us a while to get back in their good graces, but we cool now. And so I stood there with it. It was free, but I had a little donation bag, big old Santa bag at the end if you wanted to give donations. And almost every other car was like, you got to do this again. You got to do this again. So we did our fourth one in December, and we had 3,000 people over this 3 days. So I guess we got to keep doing it. Next slide. We are trying to be everywhere, folks. You see that? We were in the Championship Braves periodical, had a full page. We were in Travel and Leisure this time last year. In February, the water issue, nice little feature about Gullah things on the island. We were there. And one of the coolest things we've been a part of, we were named 8 places in America that illuminate Black history by the New York Times. That's pretty cool. The year before that, we were one of the 19 places you need to visit during Black History Month by HGTV. We've been involved in Condé Nast Traveler as well, but still, not enough people know who we are. So we're going to keep pushing this. But I want you to see this because people are starting to notice what we're doing on this little island outside of the area. Next slide. The Braves. Oh, I mentioned the Braves. That was important. Yeah. And thank you for saying this. But we also usually get a feature in USA Today's Black History Month periodical, which sees like 5 million people. So we are doing everything we can. Special thanks to ATAX at the town of Hilton Head. You got any Hilton Head officials in here? Thank y'all. It'll be recorded. They'll see that. I need to say thank you as much as possible, y'all. These are some of the people that we are involved with. You will see a couple of really cool things like the National Park Service, the Association of African American Museums, Southeastern Museums Conference, the National Museum of African American History and Culture. We are doing things with them as well, pretty cool. And then the National Museum of American History. They are working on an exhibition right now that is featuring Gullah objects that have been found in Smithsonian museums that have been sitting in storage for almost 70 years. And so this July, unless something changes, they will launch an exhibition in DC. We were their guinea pigs for their first focus group a couple years ago to try to figure out the provenance of all of these things. So that show will open up this summer. If you're in the DC area, please go check it out. We'll be promoting that as well because we'll be listed as one of their special helpers on that. Next slide. You can't see it, but it says honor. Next slide. How are we honoring this? So WLA Studios is our landscape architect. These are the people that are helping us to scope the whole property we have. Again, I mentioned we have 36 acres. It was originally 33. We were able to pick up 3 additional acres in 2022 that the town and the county own jointly right on Beach City Road. And so now we're trying to figure out what we're going to do with those things. Brown Exhibit Design Consulting is out of Somerville, Massachusetts. This is the design team that got Massachusetts people in here. This is the design team that's helping to figure out how all these exhibitions are going to look. They won a bid a few years ago. We were able to receive $250,000 from Beaufort County to do this master plan. That's why I was brought here. I had a 2-year goal of getting money to do this master plan, and there was no guarantees past those 2 years. So we had to work really hard. They gave us a 6-month extension because you know how bureaucracy goes. The county awarded us the money in February of 2018. We got access to the money in November of 2018. So we were able to get these things together, put this plan together. Next slide, please. Made this nice map, this 200-page document. We did focus groups, we had business plan, we had all this modeling done in here. This thing was immaculate. And so I'm talking with my former board chair, now my campaign chair, Shirley Peterson, who's in the audience. It was like, as soon as we get past the holidays, at the start of the year, we're gonna go right for it. And that was in November of 2019. So you know what happened after the holidays. We get into the new year, have a really great Freedom Day, and then automatically, everything's closed. So we had all this momentum, and then we had to come to a screeching halt. The thing is, this is kind of a blessing in disguise for us, honestly. It made us refocus. It made us dig back in and see the things we were doing. I think we would have jumped out too soon with a capital campaign, and we might not have done it well. So after that refocusing, we're in a much better position, and we can see it in the gains that we have gotten over these last few years. And so I have a positive story for you out of COVID, where there wasn't a whole lot of them during that time frame. You'll see this is the site plan. And so real quickly, everything on the left-hand side of that thing is in motion. F and H will be completed this year and into the ground. I'm going to show you some images of what that's going to look like very shortly. We are incredibly excited about that. In fact, F should be installed the last part of April. There will be a groundbreaking and a ribbon cut. I hope to see some of you there. And that is where the historic homes would be. We know that because of archaeology, that there were houses there. H, that's where that church is I was telling you about. We also will be working on G this year. That is the garden. We are going to have a garden on site to grow the things they were growing during this time frame. Now, the soil was horrible, but these people still found a way to grow white peas, okra, tomatoes, sweet potatoes, watermelon. I do not have a green thumb. So we will be working with local horticultural groups to put this together, and then everything that is grown will be donated to Deep Well or Second Helpings. This is just an interpretive garden, so anything that comes out of the ground is going right to charity. All right? I am very pleased to tell you, now, well, let me back up. F and H have been funded by the state of South Carolina, $1.2 million. So when you see your Beaufort County delegation, thank them, okay? Because we do all the time. And so these things are moving right now. J, E, and O, we were awarded $2.5 million from the Mellon Foundation last year. And so these projects are in motion right now. In fact, J is scheduled to open at the end of 2025. That is a 4,000 square foot classroom / archaeological lab building. So when excavations take place on the site, we do all the processing here instead of sending things off to Columbia or upstate New York and all these other places we've sent those. And the other part of that building would be a classroom style, theater style classroom with AV so we can do programs on site. That'll be our first real building. There'll be an office suite in there. And so we are very excited about that process. E is the Freedom Plaza. You see that big pond on the right-hand side? That's where that hearth was. It was going to be really nice, y'all. It really was. So we changed the format. And so we've shifted things around a little bit. In that center place, which is now a little to the right some, we are working on a very important project that has been going on since 2018. We are trying to secure a boulder from Sierra Leone, because we know most of the people on this site would have come from Sierra Leone or Angola, West African folks who already knew how to cultivate rice. Let's pop a myth bubble real quick. People who were taken from Africa and brought here to do things already knew how to do the thing before time, okay? They already knew it. That's why they were selected. The blacksmithing, the other things, they were picked. All right, soapbox is not Black History Month, but you get a quick lesson. When you look at antebellum homes and they're close to the water, you'll see that the pathway towards the antebellum home is lined with trees. That is an African concept. You plant those trees there so that those trees act like a channel. From wind coming off the water, you open up all the windows, you get centralized air. Watermelon is an African crop. And other crops were brought here, sown in the hair of children on slave ships. They come here and they plant these things. So here's your lesson you take back with you. Say, I learned something today at the Julius Scott lecture. The reason that watermelon has a stigma in the Black community is because Black people were making money off of watermelon after enslavement is over. That was the cash crop. People were starting to build wealth selling watermelon because everybody likes watermelon. And then people who, I don't have to explain this to y'all, we're all adults here, who didn't want to see that happen, started to do caricatures, have drawings, say things about pickaninnies and sambos eating watermelon, and it degrades the crop. So you have people who carry trauma, like myself, who will not eat watermelon on the Rhine in public. I know that's not a common sense thing, but that shows the ingrained nature of this stuff. I will not eat watermelon on the Rhine in public. You got to chop it up. I got to have a fork because I'm cognizant of what it looks like. And that goes back to somebody trying to degrade the funding and earning potential of black people in America. All right. I'm off my soapbox. I'm sorry. The big ticket is A. That is the Interpretive Center. We are trying to raise money for this right now. That is a $12 to $15 million project. We have a coin flip shot at $12 million this summer. I cannot go into more detail than that. But we're in a church, and those of you who like to pray, that's God calling right now. God is calling to tell you to pray for this coin flip shot in the summer. I'm not joking. Y'all please do that. All right, so we do have a shot at $12 million this summer. If we get that, that changes everything, ladies and gentlemen. To do this project, we have to raise $23 million. We've been in a quiet phase of a campaign since February of 2022. We are a third of the way there. We have $8 million in hand or in pledge. So we are getting ever closer to this thing becoming a reality. That B, I told you I was an educator. Uh-oh, go back one more, sorry. I gave him the high sign. Sorry about that. B is an event lawn. It is carved in thirds. It's a 3/4 of an acre, you already know. We want kids to be able to see what a quarter acre looks like when they're there. Every aspect of this map is going to be designed to educate the masses. Okay, this is a living institution, not a static museum, even though A will have a museum component on the first floor. The second floor would be an event space. We can do things like this, do things like Blues and Barbecue, rent it out for revenue streams, just like the event lawn and other places, so we can make this thing sustainable for years to come. Now you can go, I'm sorry. You're playing with me now. I'm sorry, I apologized. Next slide. So this is our interpretive lens. I'm aggressively silly, I apologize in advance. We are looking at this through lens of self-determination, opportunity, citizenship, freedom. There's another thing up there called democracy. And so really the four themes that chronicle this are freedom, democracy, citizenship, and opportunity. Those are American ideals. They don't get old, they don't get tired, they do get threatened. But we can all connect ourselves to those. We all know what opportunity looks like. We all know what freedom looks like. And for us, when these folks finally had an opportunity to flourish, they did just that. And we're still talking about this 162 years after the fact. Political participation, easy for me to say, education, religion, family, economic opportunity, home and land ownership, which is still important for Gullah communities now all across the corridor. For those of you who don't know, the corridor stretches from Jacksonville, North Carolina to Jacksonville, Florida. Okay, that's 4 states. From the coastline, 30 miles in, that is all the Gullah Geechee Historic Corridor. And there are a lot of sites, maybe not at the same level as Mitchellville, but there's a lot of sites along that corridor. We hope when we rise, we can get some of those boats to rise too. Right? Next slide. So, I told you we got that $1.2 million from the state. If you look at that little structure right there, those are the things that are going to be installed in April. There are no ceilings, no walls. It is a ghosted structure made out of galvanized steel, and the doors and the windows will be where you learn more about living at Mitchellville. So you can't live in this thing, but I still had to get building permits for it. I don't feel any way about that at all. I just, don't quite understand. But hey, we love the town. Appreciate y'all. If you look at this bateau panel here, this is already in the park. For those who've been to the park, this is right by the bateau. This was the first thing installed that was permanent in the park 2 years ago in April. And so it talks about the bateau. If you go down the pathway, there's another one that talks about home and land ownership. And before you round the corner, going towards the pavilion to the beach, there's one that talks about sweetgrass basket making. And those are in the park right now. Next slide. So this is that cool church archaic structure that I was telling you about. The frontage is galvanized steel like the houses. The church windows will be where you get your information. Then we have an open concept. There are benches that are styled the way that you would have saw benches in 1860s and 70s churches. And on top of those benches, which are weather treated, we're going to burn the words of hymns on tops of those benches. So Motherless Child, Amazing Grace will be on top of those benches, which leads back to this nook, this circular nook right there. In the middle, where that lady is standing, is a core sample that is about 6 feet tall. It is a cylinder, and we are embedding replicas of objects found in that cylinder. So when you come down a few inches, you're at Mitchellville. And then you keep going, you're at this 4,000-year-old indigenous imprint I was telling you about a little earlier. The little ring that's on the floor before you get there on the ground will be a land acknowledgement that will acknowledge the Eskumasu and the Kusabo nations. And those are the nations we thought were here 4,000 years ago. And so this, we're looking at the summer of this year. You know, I was hoping all this stuff's gonna be done before now, but permits. Red tape, but it's okay. We waited, we started in 2005, right? We can wait a couple months. So it's actually coming. Next slide. That Mellon Foundation thing, you can see where we're planting things now. That stuff is moved, that little circle is where that rock is gonna go. I'm gonna talk a little bit more about that rock in a minute. And right next to that is where the hearth is. That rock, we are trying to get this boulder from the old Yagala region in Sierra Leone at a place called Kabbalah Mountain, and at the base of this mountain. So this mountain is a space where Sierra Leoneans fought off enslavers for 2 centuries. And so we want to get this boulder from the base of that mountain. We're going to put it in the park so that the people who are descendants of the folks in Mitchellville can touch peace of the continent. And then everybody else who may not ever make their way over to Africa or to Sierra Leone can touch a piece of the continent, making those connections between the people. We finally have some traction. In December, we got connection with the Minister of Tourism in Sierra Leone. Her name is Nabila Tunis, and I think she's going to try to help us get to the rock. So hopefully, later this year, we'll be able to say, we got it. And we'll get it over here. Next slide. Scholarship tells us that 25 to 40% of all African Americans can trace their lineage back to South Carolina. All of us. That is a big deal. So, I spent a lot of time talking about the intrinsic aesthetic value of Mitchellville. You know, all crowds are not created equal. For you, you like that. There's some other people that want to know what's the bottom line, Ahmad, so we talked to them about what this thing could mean. Historic heritage tourism, cultural heritage tourism, is a $200 billion industry. Billion. A lot of people are spending money to trace their lineage, learn more about their history. A subset of that, African American cultural heritage tourists spend $100 billion. The state of South Carolina sees $2.4 billion of that each year. There is 500 years of history between Charleston and Savannah. Somebody can spend a whole week just along that corridor seeing all the sites. And so what we want to do is, we want people to go to the International African American Museum in Charleston, great. But after that, we want them to go to Penn Center. We want them to go to the Beaufort Reconstruction Area Monument. We want them to go to the Gullah Museum of Hilton Head. We want them to come to us go to the Owens Thomas House in Savannah. We want them to take the Gullah Heritage Trail tours while they're here, because there's so much history in this space that people need to know. And we're trying to get them there. Next slide. So our whole goal is to get people to understand why this is a very important attraction. You know, this is a place that should have been in history books from the beginning. So you've seen my goals. Obviously, I'm running a nonprofit, you know. I got to raise money. We're trying to do that. Next slide. In the middle of us doing this, we got a couple things we want to accomplish. Number one, I want to get this into curriculum because it's not there. Now, I understand I got a better shot of getting everything built in the next year than getting this in curriculum, okay? But we're going to try to do that, and people are trying to help us do that. But we got another unwritten goal at the staff level at Historic Mitchellville Freedom Park, because we're standing on the shoulders of the people, and some of you saw here today, who made the foundation for me to come in 2017 and try to run with this ball. We want people, young and young of heart, who maybe don't see hope and opportunity in their day-to-day lives and how they operate, to come to Mitchellville, see this story, look at the background, see the rich history of these people, the powerful folks who were here, and say, if they can do it, I can do it too. We want this to be an inspiration to people when they come down Beach City Road to this park that we hope to have open within the next 4 to 5 years, completely open. That's important to us, because I don't want them to be like me, getting mad that I didn't know about this stuff. And I'm supposed to be a historian. So young people who grow up in South Carolina, people who come and retire here, like some of you, we want you to understand why this is a landmark place in American history. And so I'll close with this. I told you I was a nonprofit ED. I always need check writers, but I'm not asking you for money today, unless you're going to give it to me. That's different. We'll talk outside. But along with check writers, we need cheerleaders. We gotta have cheerleaders. So now that you know a little bit more about this very important story in your backyard, I hope that you would pick up a couple of pom-poms for us and be like, I heard this really cool thing about the island, this place called Mitchellville. You should check it out. That helps us get the word out. I mean, we start a ripple here, those waters can go everywhere. So I hope that you can stand with us and help us cheer on this very important thing. This is how you can reach us. We are everywhere. I know that everybody doesn't do these social media things, but go to exploremitchellville.org for more information. Make sure you know that Mitchell has one L in it. People make that mistake all the time. No, we do not have connection with Mitchellville, Maryland. But who knows? The world is small. There's probably connections everywhere. And this story has a connective tissue that reaches beyond our borders of South Carolina. And we think we'll bring people here from miles around to learn more about why this is one of the most special places on earth. Next slide. And with that, I thank you for your time. Appreciate you. So I was informed that we may have time for a couple of questions. So we have a little microphone down here, and I've done a lot of facilitation, so I might actually pick up this mic and come to you. If one of you have a question about the things that we talked about today, just raise your hand. And if I covered it all, then I thank you for listening. Any questions? One in the back. Hold on. Test. It's working. Yes, ma'am.
Is any of the park available to visit today? We've never heard of Mitchellville, so.
What a beautiful question. Of course. I promise I didn't plant her in here, okay? The park is open every day from 6 to 6. And we have facades of buildings there. We have information panels there. We have places where you can scan QR codes to get more details. So there's things to see. We're down Beach City Road. We got our, well, let me tell you a quick story, quick. In order to honor what we believe was Harriet Tubman's 100th birthday in 2022, we decided to rename the little route that goes into the park Harriet Tubman Way. Thought it'd be a cool thing. We did it in conjunction with with Culture, HHI, the Office of Cultural Affairs here on the island. Got a little sign made, thinking, oh, this is cool. And then DOT reached out to us. Said, well, if you're gonna put that sign up, we gotta change your address. So it used to be 229 Beach City Road. And then somewhere along the way, they changed us to 228 Beach City Road without telling us. So, our address is 40 Harriet Tubman Way. But if you're having a hard time, put in 228 Beach City Road, and it might get you there. Actually, I think the last time we checked, it showed up in GPS. So I think we're good now. I think it only took 2 years. But now 40 Harriet Tubman Way, after you leave us, get some refreshments first, go on to the park and check us out. All right? Awesome. Yes, ma'am, I'll give you the mic. Oh, see, I got former board members in here. I'll step up here for a second. You can actually go to the Westin Resort and Spa right now on the second floor and see a full exhibition about Mitchellville. You even has some objects in there. These things came out of a excavation that happened in 2013 when they tried to expand the runway a little bit. So the runway is actually covering some Mitchellville stuff, all right? And so there are materials there. You don't have to do anything, so walk inside. It's on the second floor, go up the elevator, and you can check out an exhibition about us right there. So please feel free to do that. In addition, for those of you who might actually want to donate, you can go to our website and see other things, and we actually have a situation where you can leave us in your will. My friend here has the first person to do a request for us, and I appreciate you, ma'am. Thank you so much. But there's a lot of ways you should support this process. Again, those pom-poms are important, but if you got a little extra change, I am shameless. And we'll set something up for you before I leave today. Any other questions? Yes, sir. So we can preserve everybody's hearing, I'm gonna come to you with the mic.
Thank you. I hope this isn't out of line, but I was thinking with regards to fundraising and getting the message out there that I, from Hilton Head here, have seen window decals from Hilton Head Island, which I put one on my car itself. So I was wondering for a fundraiser or perhaps to carry the message forward, to get the message out, bumper stickers or window decals on our automobiles that say Mitchellville or whatever you wish to have it say might be an idea.
Give me too much. We have talked about that before, and I think it's a good idea to do it now. We have a brand new icon, the Aya. Some of y'all saw the little fern thing. It's an Indikra symbol. And we just switched to this last year because that Indikra symbol means resilience. The ferns grow in harsh climates and almost everywhere, and they stay green and they flourish. It's just like the people in Mitchellville did back in the 1860s and 70s. And so you'll see that Aya in a lot of places, and I think that Aya would look good on the back of a car. And so we played around with some vanity plates a few years ago, right? We were gonna get these processed, and then everything shut down. So it is a good opportunity for us to pick that idea back up. So I will take that, sir. Good suggestion. You might see it.
Yes, ma'am.
My
question is in line with the fundraising questions as well. So as part of your capital campaign fundraising, are you considering naming the buildings or gardens? I'd like to hear more about that.
Yes. Yes, we actually have a little internal document that had with funding levels about naming opportunities. It is important. We're a nonprofit, so there are definite naming opportunities. I will tell you, and I don't think I'm out of line for saying this, for real naming opportunities, we're probably looking at six-figure gifts because without calling names, people gave us some money, and we appreciate all money, but it'd be hard for me to name something substantial after you over $100, I appreciate your $100. I appreciate it. I'm going to shake your hand. I'm going to send you a letter. When I see you in public, I'm going to say thank you for your $100. But I can't name. You might get a mail slot or a door or something, but yes. To answer your question, and in fact, ma'am, if you'd like to talk to me afterwards about naming opportunities, I would be glad to spend time with you right after this function is over. I did say I was shameless. You kind of have to be. Any other questions? That's a good one. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see you. Get my cardio in today walking around the church. I'm going to come around this way.
I was told when we first moved to Hilton Head about Mitchellville and that it existed. And one of the wonderful things I heard about was that after the slaves were freed, what broke my heart among many things is that families were separated when they were slaves. And people could come to Mitchellville, the word spread, that they could come to Mitchellville and be reunited with their family members. Is that true?
There's probably some truth to that. I think that her question was, people were separated during enslavement, and could folks make it to Mitchellville to reunite? Anywhere that would have been a hub for people to relocate and settle would have been used in that manner. So you could have done that. What really happens for Mitchellville after the war, the population shrinks a little bit because people left to go find folks they've been separated from and to get more opportunities. And so even though the community shrinks, again, when the Army leaves in 1868, you still have people there in the community up until 1893. So what would happen is a lot of major newspapers in the South, specifically, would have these articles called Finding Lost Friends. And so formerly enslaved people would write into the Finding Lost Friends article to try to locate the people they've been separated from. So details, name is Arthur, he should be 30 years old, we were separated in this year. And so those Finding Lost Friends articles were present in newspapers everywhere and actually helped people to relocate and find folks that had been taken from them and separated during their enslavement. So that's a possibility. Any other questions? Okay, you might be our finale. Here you go.
I was just wondering what the process is to get the story of Mitchellville in curriculum.
What's the process to get a story in the curriculum? Well, we have to go through Board of Education, but I think one of the main things, I was talking about this recently, and somebody said we probably need to put some pressure on legislators. So if you're one of those people that like to write your congressmen, your state senators, state reps, or you see them in public, you say, hey, I give you a lot of money. I need you to think about this thing. That might be the way we really move it. We do see area teachers incorporating Mitchellville into their lesson plans a little bit more. We do have some lesson plans on our website for elementary, middle, and high, so you can come get some things right off of the website to use. We plan to expand that to each grade level in the near future. But I think if you really want to help, those pom-poms we just talked about, yeah, she's ready. If you would help us do that, I think that goes a long way. But talking to the people who are in political power could put the appropriate influence on education situations. Now, it's hard because all of our history books come from Texas and California because those are the biggest states. And so they have stroke about what goes in the history books based on whatever you want to see done at the time. And I'm gonna stop it there because it's dangerous territory if we start talking about curriculum in public. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate getting a chance to talk to you about Mitchellville. As you can tell, I am very passionate about this organization. We have tremendous people who have been helping us to do this process. A lot of them in this room right now. I got board members and friends and stakeholders, Rotarians in here. So we just thank you for your support over the years. This is going to be a pivotal year for historic Mitchellville Freedom Park. And I hope to see you when we start putting these things in the ground later this year. Thank you very much. Now for the camera.
Ahmad, thank you. My name is Jonathan Tompkins. I am the newest pastor here of St. Andrew by the Sea United Methodist Church, and we are so grateful for all of you today that have come, part of our beloved community here on Hilton Head. Ahmad, thank you so much. I am new to the island. That was extremely eye-opening for me, and please consider me one of your cheerleaders. I just liked you, Mitchellville on Instagram, and I have some ideas about getting some of our young people here at our church more involved in how we can partner with you for that. So thank you so much. And thank you all for being with us today. I do want to invite you to join us in our celebration center for our reception. And when you enter, you're going to see there is a quilt placed there. This is called the Unity Quilt. This is a project of the bridge builders who brought this program to us today. And it came about through a series of 11 churches and the young people at these 11 churches wanting to provide some kind of hope for a more peaceful future for them, for a more peaceful world for all of us. So you'll see that there are individual squares that are all unique, that are all made by young people from these 11 different churches, but they're all similar in their belief that the world can be a better, more peaceful, more just, more loving place for all of us. Over the next few months, this quilt is going to be on display at each of the churches as part of the project. And so today, we at St. Andrew get to house this quilt, and we're so grateful for it. I want to leave us and send us out with words from one of the young people that was involved in this quilt, and she wrote this. My quilt square was inspired by my wish that the world would look past hatred and instead turn to peace. I chose Romans 15:13 because I wanted the square to represent the good in people that God wants to spread to others. God of hope signifies in this society of evil that there is still a piece of God in everyone, which fills them with peace and joy. Below the verse, there is a sun figure, and above there is a big blue star. This represents the cycle of day and night and how in everyone there is light as well as darkness. If there is evil in our world, then there is also God with his joy, positivity, and light, waiting and wanting to be spread. As Ahmad said back in the late 1800s, if you make it to Hilton Head, you can be free. May we, in the 21st century, continue to spread that message. If you make it to Hilton Head, you can be free. And as Dr. Julius Scott prayed, may we all go from this place being mediators of joy, of peace, and of love. Go in peace. Amen.